Mr. Ali, Shadow Minister Bell, welcome and thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Great to be with you. Hi, Anne.
Thank you. I'd like to start tonight by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we are all meeting and to pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. I'd like to also say that in the many meetings that I've had with both of you, you have both expressed your respect for and acknowledgement of the important role of our sector. We've seen more recently, and I think becoming more and more evident, that there is a mounting evidence base for the important role of family daycare in the broader ECEC landscape, none the least of which is the recommendations of the Productivity Commission. We know that for many families, family daycare is their option of choice, and for many it is their only choice. So I'd like to start this evening just by asking you both, what's your vision for family daycare for the next term of government? And if elected, how will your government's policies achieve this vision? Minister Ali, if we could perhaps go to you first.
Thanks, Andrew. And I just want to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from the beautiful lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Thank you so much, Andrew, for organising this incredibly important forum here today. As you know, Andrew, and as I think some of the people who are online might also know, I grew up in family daycare. I have incredibly fond memories of Auntie Anamoya, we used to call her, and her twins, Diane and Sharon, who became a permanent fixture in our family over the years, and even as recently as last year was in contact with them as well. So for me, it's a very personal experience of the richness and the value that having family daycare as part of the early childhood education mix brings to early childhood education and care. The Prime Minister has said it many times and has made this commitment many times to Labor reforming the early learning system, making it part of an education system and part of our reform of education from birth right through to adulthood. And family daycare is a really important and necessary mix and an incredibly important part of those reforms that we're making. So I just want to go through some of the things that we've already done, because the reforms that we make in early childhood education and care, we don't want them to be that family daycare is an add-on, that it is an essential and central part of service delivery in early childhood education and care, and we recognise that. The reforms that we've made good progress on thus far include looking at the workforce, ensuring, because in acknowledging that having a strong and stable workforce is the basis of that pathway to a universal early learning system that the Prime Minister has committed to. We've also brought down the out-of-pocket costs of early childhood education and care. Out-of-pocket costs today are still lower than what they were when we first came into office. We've got both the ACCC review and the PC review making strong recommendations around family daycare. And of course, we've got the family daycare trial that is going to give us a lot of insights into how we bring in and continue to have family daycare as a critical part of the mix of service delivery in early childhood education and care. I just want to go to the importance of family daycare, particularly for culturally and linguistically diverse communities. In the proportion of children in 2024 from a language other than English background is highest in family daycare services, 39.9% of children attending. And the proportion of children attending from a refugee or special humanitarian background is also highest in family daycare services. So I really want to make that point of recognising the importance of family daycare services in delivering culturally appropriate and linguistically appropriate education and care for children from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds and from refugee and humanitarian backgrounds. We've put $16 million under the CCCF limited supply, and that was awarded to 38 priority areas across the country to establish new services. Among that, 7 million, almost 7 million of that, or around 44% of the CCCF limited supply funding, went towards setting up 34 new family daycare services in areas like the Yorke Peninsula, northwest Tasmania, and the Northern Rivers area in New South Wales. When we look at and when we talk about reform in the sector, when we talk about a universal early learning system, we're talking about a system that works for every child, no matter what their background, no matter where they live, and in the circumstances and the contexts in which they are getting education and care. So I'll end with that because I know there's a lot more for us to get through. But what I guess the clear message is that the Labor government has a commitment to a universal early learning system and a recognition of the importance of family daycare in that mix of services to ensuring that every child, no matter who they are, no matter where they live, no matter what their background, has access to and the opportunity to access early childhood education and care in those critical first 5 years of their lives.
Mr. Ali, thank you. I acknowledge your personal connection to family daycare, some of the work that's been done through the capability trial and other broader sector initiatives, and really drawing out some of those key cohorts as well. So thank you. Shadow Minister Bell, would you like to talk to us, please, a little bit about your vision for the role of family daycare and how your government might achieve that should you be elected on the 3rd of May?
Well, thank you, Andrew, and thank you for the consultative approach that you've had with me personally, mainly in Canberra, where we've met over the last couple of years, and talking about the family daycare sector and how important it is, and you're always standing up for your members with a very strong voice. So I congratulate you on that. My experience growing up, starting with our personal connections, is actually that there was no family daycare where I grew up. My parents couldn't access any care, and as the youngest of 4 children, we had to stay in my sister's room while she looked after us as kids, because our parents went to work, both of them, very early in the morning and came home after school. So I really do understand how important family daycare is, and of course the Coalition supports those who deliver family daycare, and we certainly value the work that you do, particularly when it comes to regional Australia and those thin markets. We want to see affordable, quality, and accessible access to care, and family daycare, of course, plays a huge role in that. The Minister did highlight how called families around the country particularly like to access family daycare in the spirit of community and family, and I think that's so very important. But family daycare also is important in areas of less advantage in the community, in multicultural communities, and plays a significantly important role in regional Australia. And we are open to working with the states, all of the states ready and willing to work with those to see how we can help grow family daycare, because we see that it is a very important part of the sector, and it is a sector that we feel has a significant role in helping those childcare deserts that are out there, and also those thin markets. Just a couple of things. Minister Ali outlined that costs are cheaper for early childhood education and care, but I would have to say that the figures are that out-of-pocket costs are up for families by 12.7%, and the costs of delivering childcare is up by 22.3%. And so the numbers don't lie. We are focused on accessibility, affordability, quality, and that's what we want to see. We also want to see the Community Childcare Fund, which the Minister highlighted there, to be used to plug holes in regional Australia, which is what it was meant for to start with. And many of the services that I've visited over the last few years in regional Australia have missed out on that extra top-up funding, including some family daycares that we've visited around the place, have missed out on to any top-up funding that they've applied for, because some of that funding has gone to metropolitan seats, including indeed the Prime Minister's own seat of Grayndler, when you look at the list of where some of that funding has gone, to the detriment of some of those regional areas. And so the Coalition is focused on supporting family daycare to grow however that looks. We understand and value the role that you play in family daycare and certainly in the sector. And I also understand how you must be feeling about being left behind with the worker retention payment, which I'm sure we'll get to as one of the questions. So we're ready to work with the sector to see how we can support you, because we understand the role that you play in regional Australia in particular to support families.
Shadow Minister Bell, thank you for your comments there. I know obviously your personal experience through not having access to care and how that sort of shaped your view around the value of early childhood education and care more broadly, and the role of family daycare in specific cohorts and communities, including regional, rural and remote communities. Your mention there of state and territory intersection, I think, is an interesting point. If we are going to make family daycare work, we need to work across governments, and that's sort of 3 levels of government, really. And around the CCCF grant, we do have some commentary from some of our members around more sort of secure and ongoing funding opportunities for services in regional, rural, remote that we will get to a little bit later. So if we could, I'd like to shift our attention to our election commitments. Our election commitments are a set of specific recommendations that have been developed in consultation with our members. And while I don't want to drill down into all 12 of them specifically and individually, we will share your responses with our members. They can actually read them. We'll share those in coming days. But by way of context, I'd like to lead into this conversation by providing a bit of an overview of some of the key drivers of viability, distress and decline in family daycare. And as I said, you both acknowledged the important role of family daycare, but if we don't address these issues of viability and sort of sector decline in the short term, we're not going to have the capacity as a sector to achieve the vision that you both expressed and to fulfil the important role that we play in the early childhood education and care sector. I know that you're both familiar with the model. It's a 2-tiered model of services and educators, and the sort of broader funding structures. And I guess what I wanted to talk to is that there are a range of issues that are affecting the decline in educator numbers, and that's a steady decline over an extended period of time. And they relate to new educators entering and our ability to retain educators, and all of that sort of ties up into issues around viability as well. But what we know is that the family daycare funding structure essentially is such that the family daycare service funds its operations through a per child per hour levy on the fee as part of the total fee. As educator numbers decline, obviously service revenue capacity declines. Services are left with only options are to either exit the sector, to reduce their costs, which the capacity to do so is minimal, or to increase their fees and charges to educators, which ultimately either reduce the earning capacity of the educator or increase costs to educators, reduced educator income, and the cycle continues. So what we know is that we need to step in, we need to intervene fairly soon in matters that relate to viability and decline in our sector if we're going to have the capacity to do the great work that we can do into the future. So I'd like to turn to the funding and viability related proposals in our election commitments document. And I'd ask that you talk specifically or in broad terms about some of the related election commitments, things like the childcare subsidy fee cap and non-standard hours funding, things like the worker retention payment in the family daycare context, operational supply side funding for family daycare services, and things like startup supports for new educators. If I could start first with you, Shadow Minister Bell.
Thanks, Andrew. Look, I think around this, in terms of the funding, there are a lot of lot of obviously moving parts, but today we have announced some support, certainly for the family daycare model, in terms of a pool of funding that supports our regions, raising the regions, we've called it, and it's a $100 million fund over 2 years. I'm sure the Minister's aware that we announced this morning. But this will allow community groups, family daycare operators to apply for a funding which would help them upskill or would help them with, getting a business up off the ground, those sorts of things, but also looking into perhaps innovative ways of delivering daycare within the family daycare model, but also perhaps even off-site, so that educators don't necessarily have to work from home. And so this fund that we've announced today, raising the regions $100 million over 2 years to start with, ongoing, ongoing through the Regional Future Fund, that will allow family daycare operators certainly to investigate or give them another opportunity to apply for funding to expand. And I think that's very important, that the regions, and we know that family daycare is more concentrated in the regions and less in metropolitan centres, give them an opportunity to expand their horizons and grow their business. And we'll work with the states and territories to see if there's some more innovative ways that we can grow your brand of care or your part of the sector, because this is so very important to regional families in particular. So that is a commitment that we've made. We've also heard David Littleproud today talk about the Regional Australia Future Fund, which will pay a dividend each year. And of course, that will go into those innovative models that we're talking about in the regions, and certainly into early learning services. And so family daycare is a big part of that.
Great, thank you. I did see your announcement today, and it was really encouraging to see a spotlight shone on the sector as a part of it's a policy announcement. So thank you for that. Minister Ali, would you like to share some of your thoughts with regard to specifics of those election commitments, or more broadly around funding and viability issues?
Great. Thanks, Andrew. So I'm going to go, I want to get specifically to that. So I've got 4 points that I want to raise.
Yep.
But before I raise those 4 points, I do want to make this incredibly important point, and that is that family daycare is an integral part of early childhood education and care wherever it is delivered. I don't want to give the impression that family daycare is only for rural regional. Family daycare plays an important role right across. Family daycare plays an important role in the provision of early childhood education and care services right across. In terms of the CCCF has always been for where there are thin markets, or what the ACCC calls underserviced or unserviced areas, and that includes disadvantage. So it could be inner city and it could be rural regional as well. So I just really want to make very clear that point, that we don't see family daycare as only being about servicing rural and regional. We understand the importance and the critical need of family daycare and the critical role it plays right across rural, regional, inner city, through all communities. That's the first point I want to make. Now I want to address 4 issues with you. The first one being the wage increase. And as you know, we've made a commitment to working out how that wage increase can be extended to family daycare. And we've got the report that we've commissioned by our government, developed in close consultation with the sector and with sector leaders like yourself, Andrew, and FDCA. So we're working on that, because we do want to see the wage increase made available to family daycare workers as well. Then there are 2 or 3 other things that I want to talk about as we move forward that are helping in this reform. The first one is the service delivery price that we've commissioned. Now, that is work that we've commissioned to give us a clear understanding of what the cost of providing early childhood education and care services is in different contexts. Okay? Now, we know that it costs, the costs aren't the same everywhere. The costs are differential, whether it's in rural, regional, whether it's an incredibly vulnerable community where you have children with high needs, where you're servicing a lot of children with high needs, whether you're in a green, leafy suburb, the costs aren't the same. They vary, whether it's family daycare, whether it's centre-based care, whether it's in-home care, the costs also vary. What we don't have is the data that we need to work out what is a service delivery price, and then how can we build into the way in which we fund early childhood education and care. How can we build into that those differential costs? So that service delivery price, and I mention it because it is a key piece of work that is going to inform our ongoing reforms. The second one there is the family daycare trial. That is also the capability trial. That is also a huge piece of work that is providing us the critical insights that we're going to need, including many of the issues that you've raised in your election commitment requests. Ways to grow the workforce, the ways to explore innovative family daycare models, technological solutions to improve integrity and reducing administrative burden. That family daycare capability trial is going to be a critical piece of work that will inform our reform as we go forward. And the third one, it's actually the fourth point, but the third kind of point I want to mention under that is our Building Early Childhood Education Fund. Now, that's $1 billion fund to address areas where there is underserved or unserved communities that need a solution, that need access to early childhood education and care. We're looking at centre-based, certainly, but we also want to see appropriate care, responsive care, care that is responsive, and education and care that is responsive to the needs of a community built into that as well. And that includes family daycare in areas where it may not be viable to build a U-Butte shiny new centre, but where family daycare certainly is the correct or the most appropriate service for a particular community. So it's really those four things: looking at our wage increases, looking at the service delivery price, and the family daycare capability trial as two key pieces to inform future reform, and our Building Early Childhood Education Fund.
Minister Ali, thank you. I do acknowledge your comments that, for many parents, regardless of location, that family daycare is often their option of choice, regardless of where they might live. Also would like to acknowledge the capability trial. It is a very important piece of work, and we hope that will inform decisions going forward for the sector more broadly.
Can I ask the Minister just about the question about the worker retention payment? If the government actually designed the worker retention payment program, which ends next year, we know that, why wasn't family daycare included in that, rather than excluding family daycare and then going back to ways of including them down the track?
Angie, would you like me to respond?
Yes, please.
Yeah, it was a question to the Minister. Yeah. Thanks, Anne.
Yeah. Okay, but I'm not running this session, Andrew is. So.
No, please, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Look, it was always part of the consideration, always an intention for the worker retention program, but the model of service delivery is different to centre-based care. The model of service delivery, as Andrew mentioned earlier, is you have the providers, and then you have the services who are essentially employed in a very different way to employees in centre-based early childhood education and care. That's why we commissioned this report. That's why we're working very closely with the family daycare sector to ensure that the worker retention payment, the way in which it is implemented for family daycare, works for them. Because it's a very different, and I'm sure you know this, Angie, it's a very different model of how they are paid and how they are employed, as opposed to, or in comparison to, workers in long daycare or long early childhood education and care settings.
Mr. Bell, thank you.
I understand you're in charge, Andrew.
Sorry. Shadow Minister Bell, thank you for your question. Minister Ali, thank you for your response. And yeah, acknowledging of the fact that the contractor model being sort of fundamentally different to the employment and just industrial relations system that governs the current worker retention payment in the long daycare space. Nevertheless, we are working hard with the government to expedite the family daycare response in that space. But it actually does, it segues us nicely into our next subject matter, which it's more around the sort of specific supports, tailored supports for our sector. One of the really persistent challenges that we've seen over the last decade or even more is just a sort of inadequately tailored or lack of programs or policy that relate specifically to family daycare. And at times it's forgotten or it's an afterthought. And I think that if we're really going to make family daycare work, we need to acknowledge that the sector is fundamentally different in its structure, and we need to start to think about less homogenous approaches to things like workforce, to pipeline. These are the things that we need to start to think about if we're going to make a difference in our sector. So again, coming back to the election commitments without necessarily going through every specific proposal put forward, whether you could either speak again specifically or more broadly about your government's plans for more tailored government supports, including some of the recommendations around things like the Productivity Commission's recommendation around a tailored traineeship program for funded family daycare, a dedicated family daycare strategy that sits within government to really focus on how we make family daycare work, national recruitment initiatives, easing the administrative burden, or equally around a broader application of the use of venues, which I know Angie in your release today you addressed. So if we can start with Minister Ali, if you could sort of give us some indication around some of those recommendations or responses to those issues.
Thank you, Andrew. And I just also want to thank you for the way in which we've been working together on a lot of these issues as well. And I think I've mentioned it to you before, Andrew, that the way in which early childhood education and care is funded treats it like a big monolith, but it's not a monolith. It needs to have built into it that acknowledgement of the differential way in which services are delivered, but also the different contexts in which they're delivered, which is what I was referring to in my previous answer of and why the service delivery price is such an important part of this, because it costs more to deliver in certain contexts, because it costs more to deliver in different environments. And so I think on that pathway to universal early childhood education and care, and within that kind of pathway, within that pathway, having a pillar to that, which is all about accessibility, we need to recognise that the system as it currently exists, the sector as it currently exists, is a sector that has different service delivery types, and therefore we should be responsive enough in the way in which we deal with the sector, in the way in which we fund the sector, to also incorporate into that kind of differentiation. It is not a monolith. Not every child goes to centre-based early childhood education and care, and family daycare plays a really significant role in ensuring that flexibility. Now, on the specifics that you mentioned there, Andrew, I come back to the family daycare capability trial, and that's due to provide its report. Well, our final report is coming in pretty soon. That looks at business process reviews. It looks at digital attendance verification, educator recruitment strategy, and innovative models. I do want to also reiterate our commitment to valuing the sector, and that our commitment from a Commonwealth perspective, in Commonwealth programs, we do not exclude family daycare. As an example, we had $71 million dedicated to professional development and paid practicums and practicum exchange. We did not exclude family daycare from that. So what I'm trying to say is that in some things that we do, in some of the reforms that we do, family daycare will be an integral part of that. And then there is another set of reforms that we do specifically in response to the family daycare capability trial that will be specific to family daycare.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Except that at times there will be you will be part of a broader program, and at others, a drawn out and sort of looked at in isolation.
A more tailored one, and I think that actually is a good way of approaching it, because I know when I speak to family daycare services and family daycare providers, they consider themselves as a really important part and an integral part of the whole early childhood education and care. So we need to look at early childhood education and care holistically, but there are those specifics, the specific context of family daycare that we also need to look at as well. And if we keep an eye on both, and if we do both, I think we'll get there. I'm optimistic that we'll get there.
I absolutely agree, and I think that I'd just like to come back to where we sit within a broader policy reform or program. I think one of the key differentiators that we need to remain mindful of at all times is the independent contractor relationship, and whether or not those programs fundamentally don't work in that context. I think that's something that we all need to be particularly mindful for, particularly when we talk workforce, traineeships, and bringing new educators into the system. That's where there's more work that needs to be done.
Agreed.
Sorry. Shadow Minister Bell, would you like to offer some thoughts?
Certainly. Thank you, Andrew. I mean, we understand that the family daycare model sits within the National Quality Framework. It's a small part of a larger sector, but it does operate quite differently. And as you rightly pointed out, when you've got an educator who works for themselves, they essentially are a small business. And I think the Coalition always understands how small and family businesses run. Well, that's where I grew up, working in small and family businesses myself for many years, working in retail businesses. And I think it's important that we explore ways that we can help those businesses to grow, because clearly the sector, as a subsector of the larger sector, has shrunk over the last years, and we need to find innovative new ways to grow the family daycare part of the sector. And I point again to the Innovation Fund, or the Raising the Regions Fund, as a starting point, because I think we need to start thinking more broadly about how we can deliver more flexible services to families, more choice for families, and that currently is what family daycare provides to a lot of families who are, might have odd hours of work. You're open earlier, you close later. You're helping those families who are perhaps even shift workers at times, and that's very important to deliver that flexibility and choice. So the Coalition is open to working with family daycare, obviously, to support you, Family Daycare Australia, to support you, to help your members to grow what they are doing. And I think that there are some innovative ways that we can work with you. We can take some feedback from you and explore, your landscape more deeply to see how we can support you. And I think it's clear that Labor, with some of their policies, have left you behind. And I would say that the Coalition wants to support you, not just because you're mainly in regional Australia, but because you offer flexibility and choice for families. And there are long waiting lists around the country where families actually don't have access at all to a place. And we see family daycare as part of the solution to that. If we can have family daycare in community centres or libraries, those sorts of places, if we can look into how we can do that as part of the Raising the Regions funding pool, and help those families in regional Australia to have a choice where currently they do not. We know that 25% of families live in a childcare desert in Australia, and so we want to provide flexibility and choice for those families. So that's what I would say. We're open to working with the sector on how we can improve, but also we want to see you grow, because we see you as a very important part of the solution when it comes to those families that don't have flexibility or choice, or don't indeed even have access at this point. And so I don't believe this government has done anything to address those concerns.
Shadow Minister Bell, thank you for your responses there. I would like to pick up on your note around the small businesses. Family daycare is one of the largest networks of women in small business in Australia, and it shouldn't go overlooked the fact that as a woman working in their own small business, when we talk about financial security, autonomy, there are over and above the important functions of family daycare in providing early education and care for everyone else to go to work. It is also a significant career opportunity for women to operate and run their own small business. And there is, I think, work to do in the small business part of the function of being a family daycare educator. So thank you for your comments there. We did ask our members in advance of tonight's session to share some questions with us that they may have. Now, we did get a significant volume of questions, but many of those have been, essentially fundamentally wrapped up in the conversations we've had. Things like the childcare subsidy fee cap, the worker retention payment, policies and programs that really demonstrate the value of family daycare and the unique sort of nature of our sector. So we won't cover that territory again. But there were a couple of questions that I think give us an opportunity to dive a little bit deeper into some of the key issues and thoughts of our members. So I'll read the question out and give you both an opportunity to respond. So the question at verbatim: when is someone going to acknowledge the huge contribution to shift work hours, night care, public holiday care and weekend care, and actually do something about the shortfall in subsidy available for parents who need that care and for educators who work all of those hours with limited ability to charge accordingly? Shadow Minister Bell, would you like to go first?
Well, I would firstly acknowledge that family daycare, and I think I have done that a few times, but I would further acknowledge that the Coalition understands how important a role you play in the sector for being that part of the sector that offers exactly what you were talking about, which is flexibility and choice, to my last point, to regional families in particular, but to families across Australia. And I would say that the Coalition always supports small and family business models, and we are also open to working with Family Daycare Australia, to working with the states, also on regulation and on looking at how we can make it easier, how we can improve your business models, how we can come up with new innovative models. All of these things are on the table with our new fund, and of course it starts with that $100 million of funding across 2 years, and it will be ongoing through the Regional Australia Future Fund. And so we have always invested in early childhood education and care. We know the last time we were in government, we almost doubled the subsidy. We made some huge reforms, the biggest reforms that had been undertaken in some 40 years. We took the childcare subsidy from $6.5 billion to $11 billion. We're very proud of our history in the sector. We made huge reforms on higher childcare subsidy that saw 280,000 extra children come into the sector. So we are very invested in early childhood education and care. And we have a plan for moving forward that starts with this $100 million fund across 2 years that will help with new innovative models. And I think that's really so very important to know for family daycare educators, that we do want to see how we can improve the environment that you are currently operating in, and see new educators, as you said, Andrew, come in. And part of that fund can be used for upskilling. It can also be used for business cases. It can be used for a number of things that we'll outline when we open that round, should we come to government. And I think that's important to know, that we are looking at how we can improve that. And it's hugely relevant to family daycare. In fact, it's probably most relevant to family daycare as the smallest part of the sector that has a very different business model to the rest of the sector.
Shadow Minister Bell, thank you for your response there. I apologise if we sort of forces us into covering a ground that we've already covered. I've sort of tried to pick out some that might give us opportunity to delve a little bit deeper, and I acknowledge your comments around the Building the Future Fund and how those various elements can come together to pick out some of the specific elements that we're talking about here. Minister Ali, around the issues of sort of those non-standard hours care, would you like to share some thoughts around that?
I'm actually just smiling because one of my fondest memories as a child is when we got to stay overnight at our family daycare. Our family daycare provider, my sister and I, for 4 nights while my mum was in hospital giving birth to my baby brother, who has always reminded us that he's the only one who was born in Australia since the day that he was born. And so, yeah, absolutely, family daycare has that flexibility of service, and we acknowledge those longer hours and the weekend care, and even that kind of care where if a family needs overnight care, for example, as the example that I just gave when my mum went into hospital to give birth to my brother, who to this day still annoys me. This is where, again, I'm going to point to the service delivery price and to that point that I made earlier about not treating all of early childhood education and care as a giant monolith, where, every service in every context and every child and every family has exactly the same needs. Understanding that families have different needs and that different parts of the early childhood education and care sector are better able to cater to those needs. So family daycare, for example, better able to cater for families who need those flexible hours, better able to cater for communities where there are not enough children to warrant a UBU early childhood education and care centre.
Yeah.
And that's why, again, I come back to the importance of understanding and having a data-driven picture of early childhood education and care costs as a key underpinning of our future reform, with family daycare very much entrenched in that understanding of what future reform looks like and where family daycare sits in that future reform.
Mr. Ali, thank you for your comments. I want to make the point, obviously, that caring for children outside of standard hours is tough. It's a significant impost on an educator's family, and quite frankly, if it's not worth it, no one's going to do it. So I think that is an important point that needs to be made. I might just, if I could, we may have time at the end. I'd just like to prompt anyone who may have a question watching online, if they feel like there's any territory that we haven't covered, to share those questions with us online. And if we get to it with any time to spare, then we'll have a look at some of those questions. If we could just share another question with you, and again, we have covered this territory to a degree, and it talks about regional, rural, and remote. How will you ensure the financial sustainability of family daycare organisations operating in regional, rural, and remote areas? What strategies will you implement to support long-term funding models that move away from competitive grants and enable ongoing, reliable funding? So I accept that we've touched on regional, rural, remote, acknowledged, and I think the key issue here is this sort of the challenges associated with long-term viability when a service is sort of living grant to grant. That's sort of the distinction I think that I can see in this question. Minister Ali, would you like to add anything further on that issue?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. And you're right. Like, having run a not-for-profit myself, I know what it's like to live on grant to grant and understand what that a lot of your time is spent filling in forms and grant applications rather than doing the work that needs to be done, your core business. Look, the CCCF program, which has $500 million of support to the sustainability of services in vulnerable communities as well as rural and regional, about 85% of that funding this year went to regional communities, including family daycare services as well in those communities. But again, I really do want to come back, and I know I keep talking about the service delivery price, but to me it is absolutely pivotal in future reform, because it will have a huge impact on how we fund. It will inform future funding, and it will give us that data that we need to know what is the cost of delivering in rural, regional, what is the cost of delivering family daycare, what is the cost of delivering in outside of hours care, what is the cost of delivering flexible hours care, in all the different contexts, rather than the system that we currently have, which treats all the contexts as one. So again, I come back to that really critical piece of data that I'm really looking forward to receiving in charting the pathway forward.
Great, thank you. And Shadow Minister Bell, would you like to add anything specifically around sort of sustainable ongoing support for those services in those regional, rural and remote?
Well, I think it comes back to what I was talking about before with the sustainable business model. And I think family daycare should be looked at as certainly part of the sector, but a unique part of the sector, because family daycare operators and services and educators would know their cost delivery price, because they know how much they're paying for electricity, which has gone through the roof. They know how much they're paying for food, which has also gone through the roof. And they know, as small business people, how much money they are making when they do their tax return. And as a sole trader, as a small operator, you would already know what your service price delivery is, and as small business people do. And so I guess I would, ask the Minister, is there going to be a focus on family daycare in terms of what their cost delivery model price is compared to the rest of the sector? Because it's very, very different as an individual sole trader running a business. In fact, it's probably tax breaks that you'll be looking at, or instant asset write-off breaks that you'll be looking at to try and minimise your tax so that you can, at the end of the day, earn more money. The Coalition wants to see sustainable small businesses. We've seen 30,000 small businesses actually go broke in the last 3 years under this Labor government. And what we want to see is a sustainable business model for family daycare. We want to make sure that family daycare is a bigger part of the sector. It is part of the solution. We value family daycare as for what it does within the sector to deliver flexibility and choice, and we want to support you in doing what you do so well. So I think it's about also looking outside the square to see how we can help with your business models, take feedback from you, consult with you about where we do have some wriggle room to help you, and how we can help make sure family daycare is more sustainable into the future. And I think that's so very important. What we won't do is exclude you from a worker retention payment and a rollout that's been bungled at best, where leave you behind and not include you. That is something that the Coalition would not do.
Shadow Minister Bell, thank you for your comments. Was there a question there for Minister Ali? I think there was a question around
Sure.
Yeah, including family daycare in specifically in the price delivery service delivery model.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I just want to reiterate, because I think I thought I made this point very clearly, but the whole purpose of a service delivery price is to understand the cost of delivering different services in different contexts, whether it is family daycare, long daycare, in-home care, all of the different kinds of service delivery models that are in early childhood education and care sector today.
It's not going to be the same in every single family daycare service, because some might have solar panels where they have a lower electricity cost. Some might, each environment in a family daycare is going to cost different.
That's why we're having a service delivery price. That's why we're doing this research, because we want data-driven 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 research and a data-driven solution to ensure that we know what the costs are in different contexts for different kinds of services, whether it is family daycare, whether it is centre-based care, whether it is in-home care, whether it is out-of-hours care, every single kind of service delivery within the early childhood education and care sector. I'm not quite sure what more I can say other than that is the whole purpose of a service delivery price, is to get that data.
But therein, I'm sorry, Minister, but therein it lies the problem, because obviously there's no understanding that each individual family, we're only talking about family daycare here, which is a completely different model, centre-based daycare to in-home care. These are different, completely different models, and each individual family daycarer will have a different cost model. That's how small businesses work. And so I'm not sure how you're going to get data from each individual family daycare, over 400 of them around the country, to come up with an average that means nothing to that individual educator who has a family daycare in their home at the moment. So my point is that the Coalition understands how small businesses work, and we understand how family daycare fits within the sector and how unique it is within the sector, because the business models in the other parts of the sector are completely and utterly different from family daycare. And
I don't think we're saying anything different here, Angie, to be quite honest with you. I think we're in agreement that there are differential costs and that there are different service models and that there are different service delivery costs, which is why we are getting a service delivery price, so that we have the data in order to be able to ensure that we know what the costs are.
If I could jump in, please, for a moment. I really appreciate and respect the exchange there. And look, I think that my takeaway from it is that, you both, to me, are expressing a good understanding of the fact that the model is different. It does vary educator to educator. It certainly varies, from other models within the sector. The constraints around the charging practices, the ceiling of the childcare subsidy fee cap, and just being competitive in the market. There are those constraints that will drive and impact the charging practices and the earning capability and the viability of services and educators. But if I could just throw a bit of an umbrella over the comments, that I do respect and acknowledge the fact that there is a clear understanding around the differences around the way that family daycare operates. If I could, I've just got a little message in the chat there that there is, we've got a couple of live questions that the team feel may give us an opportunity to cover off some new territory. I'm conscious we've got 4 minutes left, so I'm going to go with one question, and then we'll sort of wrap up. So will there be funding specifically for family daycare? As a small sector, I'm concerned that if we're forced to compete for funding against larger services, we'll be at a significant disadvantage from Victoria. Acknowledging again that we may cover some old territory, but I would like to give you the opportunity to respond. Minister Ali, would you like to respond to the question?
Unmute myself. Yeah, thank you. We will work with the family daycare on this, but I do want to point out two things. I want to point out that the ACCC review and the PC review both pointed to family daycare and the caps, the hourly caps on family daycare, and made that acknowledge that the cap was lower for family daycare. I really want to make that point. In terms of funding specifically for family daycare, we do already fund family daycare as part of CCCF, as I mentioned earlier on in the piece. Again, I think that, as we work towards this pathway of reform and universal early childhood education and care, we will necessarily have to look at, how we fund different parts of the sector, whether it's family daycare or whether it's or whether it's centre-based care. And so that's why, again, I point to the trial and to the service delivery price as two key pieces of data, or two key reviews and pieces of data that are going to help us chart the way forward. But I think the overall point to make is that there is a very, very deep and keen understanding of the fact that family daycare is different. It is part of early childhood education and care. It is part of education from birth right through to adulthood, and therefore is part of our commitment to reforming education for every child. But it is different in the way in which it's structured, in the way in which it delivers services, and even to an extent, and also services as well. So the point I would like to finish on there is just to reassure all your viewers that we have that keen understanding, not just of the importance of family daycare in the mix, but also of the uniqueness of family daycare in the mix. And I'm really appreciative of the way in which the sector has engaged with me thus far, and look forward to further engagement as well.
Riley, thank you. Very quickly, Shadow Minister Bell, was there anything you'd like to add just with regards to the specific funding streams for family?
Look, I think just summarising, obviously there's 3 areas where family daycare is funded. Firstly, it's a proportion of the $16 billion in childcare subsidy that goes to family daycare. Secondly, the CCCF, the Community Childcare Fund, will continue to support a proportion of family daycare providers as well. And thirdly, I would add to that the $100 million over 2 years. A proportion of that will also go to supporting family daycare. So I think they are three measures that the coalition government is committed to, and I think that family daycare plays an incredibly important role and part of the sector. I just want to really press home that point, how we believe you are part of the solution. And to finish, I know it's 5 o'clock, I want to just thank every educator for what they do for local families, particularly in communities that have no other access to early learning at all, because there are lots and lots of families around the country who don't have any access. And I know that in places like Ardrossan in South Australia, for example, I visited a family daycare there. I'm not sure if you're online, but, I understand how difficult it can be. And I want to thank you for everything that you do for our particularly regional families across the country.
Shadow Minister Bell, thanks for your comment and a lovely way to wrap up. Finally, Minister, any last comments before we call it a night?
Oh, thank you, Andrew. Again, I just want to reiterate Angie's thanks to you and to all the family daycare providers and to all educators, not just for the work that you do, but I've been really fortunate and really privileged to have open engagement with the family daycare sector over the last 3 years since taking on the role of the Minister for Early Childhood Education and Care. That has been invaluable, absolutely invaluable to me as we work towards crafting this pathway to a universal early learning system that is affordable, that is accessible, and that works for every child, every family, every community. So your engagement has been incredibly, incredibly valuable. And I hope that, whatever happens next, that we can continue that engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you both for joining us tonight. You have taken the words out of my mouth. I want to wish you all the best, both of you, for the election. And regardless of the outcome, we continue to work together towards better outcomes for our sector, and in turn better outcomes for children and families right across Australia. So thank you both, and good evening.
Thank you all. Bye-bye. Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah.